Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Master solid skills and voluntarily plan and we gather here for we cannot master solid skills and voluntarily
CBC Central Committee the establishment of export processing zones.
If you Google the word cough, you'll find a scientific explanation. A cough is your body's way of responding to an irritant in your throat. An occasional cough is normal and healthy. But if you're the president of the country that exported a deadly virus to the whole world, your cough is not just another cough, it is global news. It is fuel for speculation. And so it happened that Xi Jinping had multiple fits of cough during a speech. The Chinese state cameras tried to hide him, but their mics caught the audio. The clips have gone viral since, and so has the question. Is Xi Jinping COVID positive? Has China's virus reached its president? Logic says the assumption is far-fetched, it's extreme. But experience says, with China, you never know. There is no limit to what they'll hide. China's cover-up stretches from dubious vaccines to hidden cases. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss how China's actions have won it the distrust of the world, and how the president's cough may undo months of propaganda to project that China has defeated the virus it gave us. Also on the show, is social media manipulating the US election? Twitter and Facebook have blocked a New York Post story against Joe Biden. It's triggered a storm. We'll tell you all about it. In Pakistan, the government launches a major crackdown ahead of an opposition protest. Hundreds of opposition workers have been arrested. Tens of thousands of Afghans flee violence in the province of Helmand as the Taliban launch another offensive amid stalled peace talks. And the Vatican begins its first ever sex abuse trial. A whistleblower says he wrote to the Pope, but he was expelled from the church. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
India's Ministry of External Affairs has said New Delhi has been invited for the meet on Rohingya refugees hosted by the US, the UK, the EU and the UN Refugee Agency. India would also be delivering a submarine to Myanmar, which will be the country's first submarine. Azerbaijan in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. Azerbaijan has accused Armenia of trying to attack its gas and oil pipelines and warned of a severe response. Armenia has denied the claim. In an effort to reset ties with India, Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Ali has reshuffled his cabinet and shunted out the Defence Minister Ishwar Pokhrel. This comes ahead of the Indian Army Chief M.M. Naravani's visit to the country in November. As Minister Pokhrel has been one of India's most vocal critics, Indian Army Chief M.M. Naravani will be visiting Nepal in the first week of November. The visit aims at improving bilateral ties between the two neighbouring nations. Thai protesters clashed with police after Thailand imposed a state of emergency in an effort to end 3 months of protests, calling for reforms to the monarchy. Gatherings of 5 or more people have been banned. Publication of news and online messages that could jeopardize national security have also been banned. Authorities have been allowed to prohibit people from entering designated locations. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced a nightly curfew for big cities, including Paris, as the country battles a second wave of COVID-19. France has been reporting over 20,000 cases on a daily basis over the past few days, with the overall case count nearing 800,000. The European Union has announced sanctions against 6 members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, including the head of Russia's domestic spy agency, over the poisoning of key opposition figure Alexei Navalny. The president of Kyrgyzstan, Soronbay Jeenbekov, has resigned after 10 days of unrest following a disputed election, saying he wanted to prevent clashes between security forces and protesters who have demanded his removal from office. A Bangladesh court has sentenced 5 men to death in a 2012 gang rape case. The death sentence comes days after the Sheikh Hasina government introduced death penalty in rape cases after a series of brutal rapes in the last few weeks. World champions France maintained their unbeaten record in this year's UEFA Nations League by defeating Croatia 2-1 in their top-tier Group 3 match. Antoine Griezmann fired France into an 8th-minute lead in a repeat of the 2018 World Cup final. But hosts Croatia did get their equalizer in the 65th minute via a sublime shot from midfielder Nikola Vlasic. France missed a host of chances, but the win was secured in the 79th minute as Kylian Mbappe finished off an excellent team move. Victory keeps France level on points with Portugal at the top of the group, with the European champions beating Sweden 3-0. Former badminton world number 1 Kidambi Shrikant reached his first quarterfinal of 2020 after a straightforward win in the second round of the Denmark Open. The 5th-seeded Indian was up against Canadian Jason Anthony Hoshwi and produced a confident display to wrap up a 21-15, 21-14 victory in just 33 minutes. He will now face second seed Chu Tien Chen in the last 8.
Last year, this wouldn't have been news. But this year, it's a global headline, because this year is different. The most unexpected things happen, like a coughing fit going viral. The man coughing is Xi Jinping, the president of China, the country that exported the Wuhan virus pandemic. President Xi was delivering a speech in China and he coughed a lot. What I'm about to show you are clips sliced from a 50-minute-long address of the Chinese president. Social media has analyzed this in great detail. Even though Chinese cameras tried to hide the president, they caught at least 4 bouts of cough in a matter of minutes. Take a look.
Which means we cannot master solid skills and voluntarily plan and
What you just saw is footage from a ceremony in Shenzhen. 40 years ago, Shenzhen was established as a special economic zone. Now, China wants to turn it into a technology powerhouse. That was the subject of Xi Jinping's speech, a speech that he struggled to get through. Chinese state media or social media had no mention of this. But Xi Jinping's violent cough made global news. It has triggered intense speculation. Let me show you some of the headlines. Xi Jinping coughs and coughs at Shenzhen event. This headline is from Apple Daily. The newspaper from Hong Kong, whose publisher Jimmy Lai was arrested under the new national security law. Apple Daily reported about Xi Jinping's coughing fit in great detail. It said the speech started 30 minutes late and that Xi was speaking at a quote-unquote slow pace during the first half. In the second half, he paused frequently for a sip of water and coughed repeatedly. Whenever he stopped, the state broadcaster turned the camera away from the president to the guests. But those listening to the speech could hear Xi Jinping cough. Let me show you that clip again.
Which means we cannot master solid skills and voluntarily plan and
These clips went viral, fueling intense speculation. The Epoch Times asked, Xi Jinping in Shenzhen, is he infected? Honestly, we don't have the answer. It could be anything. Perhaps the Chinese president had a cough or his throat was dry. But the speculation is hardly surprising because we're talking about China here, a country where you never really know, where cover-ups and lies are the norm. So it's only natural for the world to ask if the president is infected. And it's just like China to not respond. Beijing should come clean. Even if the president has a condition, speaking out might improve their image. And he won't be the only one to have tested positive if he has. Leaders are not immune to coughs, or to the Wuhan virus for that matter. US President Donald Trump tested positive. So did Boris Johnson of the UK, Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil. The presidents of Bolivia, Guatemala and Honduras were infected too. As were the prime ministers of Armenia and Russia. Xi Jinping would be just another name on the list. But he won't be. Because China is not famous for being transparent. Look at their record. Look at the president's record. He had also mysteriously disappeared when the virus first spread in China. He went missing from public view not once but twice. Then he appeared without a mask. In a bid to prove that China has defeated the virus, he lifted lockdowns, allowed pool parties. The stunt may have backfired. He sat coughing with China's top leaders in close proximity without a mask on. He may have compromised all of them. Someone like Donald Trump would have been hauled over the coals for something like this. But in China, nobody questions the president. Everyone says the virus has been defeated. Which brings me to something that the world has been collectively wondering about. Everywhere, there's a looming second wave, another round of lockdowns, but China seems to be immune from its own virus. If you go by official figures, Nepal has more cases than China. Can you believe it? Nepal is about 65 times smaller than China. It has 120,000 cases. China has only 91,000 cases. It's either a lie or a miracle. If China has figured out the magic formula to beat the virus, why doesn't it share it with the world? After all, it did not think twice before sharing the virus with the world. What China is doing is hiding the cases, underplaying outbreaks. Take the case of the Chinese city of Qingdao. It reported an outbreak. Do you know what happened? 2 health officials were sacked over it. A hospital president and the director of Health Commission are now under investigation. The city reported 12 cases. Reports say the authorities will test all 9 million people in the city for new infections. China will also keep injecting its citizens with dubious vaccines and keep lifting restrictions as if the virus has vanished. Take a look at this. These are images from the Golden Week holiday. Large crowds thronging the Great Wall of China. Or this, the now famous pool party in Wuhan. So many propaganda videos to show that China has bounced back. One man's cough can undo a lot. And talking about undoing things, China's wolf warriors have ruined its relations with many countries. China's aggression has lost its friends. Now, China's foreign minister is trying to undo the damage. After his difficult visit to Europe, Wang Yi is on a tour to Southeast Asia. This is a diplomatic mission. The United States has been trying to reach out to these countries, and China wants to stop them from becoming America's allies. But the Chinese foreign minister faces a hostile crowd on this tour. This report tells you why.
Wang Yi is a man on a mission. Beijing has dispatched its foreign minister on a 5-nation tour to Southeast Asia, as the United States tries to firm up an alliance with China's rivals in the neighborhood. Wang Yi is visiting Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Laos and Thailand. Out of this list, 4 countries recently signed up to join a new partnership led by the United States. Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam are now members of the new US-Mekong Partnership, an alliance designed to keep China in check. With his visit, Wang Yi is trying to keep some neighbors within China's fold, but it won't be easy. Southeast Asian countries haven't been fans of China, especially those countries that stake a claim to the South China Sea, a region where the Chinese Navy has stepped up its aggressive activities. Wang Yi's first challenge is to contain the fallout of China's military actions. So the Chinese foreign minister is turning up the charm offensive. In Thailand, he threw caution to the wind. Wang Yi removed his mask for his photo op with the Thai foreign minister. In Cambodia, he greeted the Prime Minister with a smile and a wave. The flashes of the camera haven't distracted Wang Yi. In Malaysia, he took aim at the Quad, the alliance between India, Australia, Japan and the United States. The Chinese foreign minister said America wants to maintain its hegemony through the Quad.
The so-called Indo-Pacific strategy proposed by the US, in essence, it is built on the Quad mechanism involving the US, Japan, India and Australia and aims to build a new NATO in the so-called Indo-Pacific. The strategy trumpets the old-fashioned Cold War mentality, proceeds the confrontation among different groups and blocs and geopolitical competition, and maintains the predominance and hegemony system of the US.
With those words, Wang Yi tried to distract the world from China's own activities. Reports say China conducted fresh naval exercises in Bohai Sea. As Xi Jinping inspected the Chinese Navy on Tuesday, the Chinese president was in Guangdong province, a move that experts believe sent a signal to the Chinese forces to prepare for any potential military conflict. With his visit to Southeast Asia, Wang Yi wants the world to forget about China's expansionist drive. But with each military drill, China finds its list of friends in Southeast Asia shrinking fast. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The fight between China and the United States is only intensifying. The presidential election is barely weeks away, and that has not stopped the Trump administration from taking on China. Perhaps the election is the reason why Trump is going after China so strongly. Well, whatever be the reason, the relationship is going downhill. The latest point of contention is Tibet. The United States has appointed a Tibet coordinator, a senior human rights official. What will he do? Promote a dialogue between the Dalai Lama and China. This post is not new, but it's been lying vacant since Trump came to power. Now, in the thick of the election, he has filled the vacancy. The message is quite clear. America does not want to leave any opportunity to pull China down. Robert Destro, the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, will take this job. The announcement comes right after China's re-election to the UN Human Rights Council, a council that America, by the way, left 2 years ago. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo briefed the press yesterday, and he used the opportunity to once again criticize China on its human rights violations.
Whether it's in Xinjiang, what's taking place there, whether it's Tibet, we talked about that a little bit here this morning, whether that's in Inner Mongolia and the Inner Mongolians' simple desire to live in freedom and exercise their own understandings of what freedom and human dignity look like. In each of those places, I'd had Hong Kong, in each of those places, we simply are demanding of the Chinese Communist Party what we ask of every nation, is to preserve basic freedoms, human dignity, religious freedom for every one of their citizens.
Clearly, the United States wanted to make a statement. They wanted to highlight China's persecution of minorities on a day when China was re-elected to the Human Rights Council, and that's what they did. So what will America's new appointee do? What did his predecessors do? Beijing has never dealt with a special coordinator for Tibet, and it won't deal with this one either. China criticized this appointment and said that America is meddling in its internal affairs.
The establishment of the so-called Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues by the US is totally out of political manipulation and aiming to interfere in China's internal matters and undermine the development and stability of Tibet. China always firmly opposed it and has never recognized it.
Such statements may not make any difference to America's approach. Earlier this month, the United States, alongside 39 other countries, raised China's rights violations at the United Nations. A joint statement was presented to the General Assembly. It demanded that independent observers, including the United Nations Human Rights Chief, should have unfettered access to Xinjiang, the province where more than 1 million Muslims are facing persecution. Last month, Mike Pompeo led a campaign to the Vatican. He urged the Pope to condemn China's human rights abuses. He was denied a meeting with the Pope, but Pompeo did communicate his stand to the Vatican's top officials. In the month of July, the U.S. State Department barred Chinese officials who restrict access to Tibet. Chinese authorities who have restricted journalists, tourists, diplomats, or American officials will not be able to get a U.S. visa now. The United States has taken a tough stand against China on the issue of human rights. What it needs is global consensus and the support, at least, of the Quad, countries like Australia, Japan, and India. They must join hands to counter China on its human rights record. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, it's a double whammy for the Imran Khan government. The opposition is set to go on a nationwide offensive on the 16th of October. But before they do so, demonstrations of a new kind, a different color, have erupted in the national capital. Hundreds of Pakistani citizens have hit the streets of Islamabad. What are they protesting? What are their demands? And how is Imran Khan dealing with these crises? We'll start with what's happening in Islamabad. The capital has been taken by a storm of union-led protests from various sectors. Thousands converged outside the Pakistani parliament and staged a sit-in. This included government employees, farmers, teachers, doctors, health workers, and pensioners. They were all protesting against price hike and what they call anti-employee policies. Policies of the Pakistan government, of course. Most of them called off their sit-ins after quote-unquote successful negotiations with the government. But women health workers are refusing to cede ground. They are on what you call a dharna at Islamabad's famous D Chowk. What do they want? Our correspondent Anas Malik was at the protest site. He sent us this report.
Well, I'm standing at Islamabad's famous D Chowk, and the protesting workers right behind me are lady health workers. Yesterday, we saw a plethora of protests here at the D Chowk in Islamabad, where people from different walks of lives, mostly government employees, those laborers, clerks, teachers, and doctors as well, they came protesting. But their protests were called off after negotiation. And the lady health workers right behind me, as you can see, they are there, and they are demanding that their that their demand should be met, that there should be basic job security, infrastructural changes. They should be given pension upon the requirement. When they go for these drives, the polio drives and other health drives, they should be given basic security and a pay raise as well, and that a uniform pay raise should be implemented. That is what the lady health workers demand is there.
A unified pay structure, job insurance, physical security, these are fair demands, especially for the Pakistan Prime Minister, who has always made tall claims about supporting daily wage earners. He is now using the socio-economic crises and the IMF loans as a pretext to reject these demands. At the same time, he is cracking down on opposition voices. Asif Ali Zardari, the former president of Pakistan and leader of the Pakistan People's Party, he has been issued an arrest warrant by the National Accountability Bureau, the NAB, Pakistan's anti-corruption watchdog. Mr. Zardari is being accused of corruption worth 8 billion Pakistani rupees. The anti-graft body is investigating his alleged suspicious financial transactions. His son Bilawal Bhutto Zardari says this is yet another attempt by Imran Khan to vilify the opposition's anti-corruption movement. In a tweet, he said these tactics are not new and will do nothing to deter his party. And the Zardaris, by the way, are not the only ones being targeted by the Pakistan government. Maryam Nawaz of the Pakistan Muslim League is also on the radar. Reports say the Pakistan government may block all routes to Maryam Nawaz's residence to stop her from attending the first opposition demonstration scheduled for Friday. Then we come to the opposition workers. According to the Dawn, more than 400 opposition workers in Pakistan have been detained. For what? For flouting COVID-19 guidelines. Yet another excuse, say critics, to sabotage the planned demonstrations. Those held include district presidents and lawmakers of both the PPP, Pakistan People's Party, and the PMLN, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. Nawaz Sharif, the former Prime Minister of the country, has requested the Pakistan police, and I quote, do not comply with Imran Niazi's unlawful orders to arrest PMLN workers, raid their homes or hinder their travel to Gujranwala. Refuse, says Nawaz Sharif. So Pakistani citizens are out on the streets. The opposition is gearing for a nationwide demonstration and the Pakistan Prime Minister is responding with force. It's quite a fall from grace for Imran Khan. He was once a champion of free speech and civil rights movements. But now he is a Pakistan army puppet trying all he can to crush dissent.
जितने भी पाकिस्तान के मसले हैं मुश्किल हैं लेकिन सब हल हो सकते हैं सब मुमकिन है इरादा चाहिए कौम इकट्ठी हो जाए कोई चीज नामुमकिन नहीं है.
Let's talk about the Vatican, the collective voice of billions of Catholics around the world. It has existed as an independent city-state for decades. It mints its own euros, prints its own stamps, issues its own passports, has its own flag, and is run by its own laws. Laws that seem to have done very little to protect innocent children from predatory priests. The Vatican has a long history of child sexual abuse and cover-ups by its own bishops. The first of its kind trial of 2 priests within the Vatican's walls has come as yet another reminder of why the Roman Catholic Church is in urgent need of reform. Here's a report.
The Wuhan virus has long breached the walls of the Vatican. Sanitation drives like these have become a frequent sight inside St. Peter's Basilica. But a systemic sanitization still awaits the Catholic Church. The scourge of sexual abuse continues to soil the Holy See. In the latest instance, the Vatican has put 2 priests on trial over alleged sexual abuse. Reverend Gabriele Martinelli and Enrico Radis. One has been accused of sexually abusing an altar boy in a prominent Vatican City seminary. The other of covering up the entire case. This is the first such trial within the Vatican's walls. The case dates back to 2007. According to the charges read in a courtroom, the priests forced a 16-year-old boy to submit to cardinal relations, acts of sodomy and forced masturbation.
I saw violence made through blackmail and abuse of power by Martinelli. It was terrifying seeing these things because at the time I was only 15. I'd never seen 2 people have sex, and yet I was forced to watch these things inside the Vatican. Psychologically, it was very tough to take because I came to the Vatican to serve the church. I was a strong believer.
This was the key whistleblower in the case, Kamil Jarzembowski, the roommate of the victim. He claims to have written several letters about the matter to Pope Francis and church authorities, but not once did he receive a reply. Instead, he was kicked out of the church.
I wanted to serve in St. Peter's Basilica, the biggest in the world, the symbol for all Catholics. And yet at night, I was forced to look at these scenes. With the blackmail, that if I opened my mouth, I would suffer grave consequences instead of the real perpetrators of the abuse. And so it happened in phases. I'm not a Catholic, not anymore. I'm currently an atheist. I lost my faith in God shortly after I was kicked out of the Vatican.
The sex abuse crisis has dogged the church for decades. In 2019, a record 1,000 cases of sexual abuse were reported to the Vatican. 2020 is no different. Multiple cases of clergy abuse and cover-ups have sprung across the world in the last 10 months. In Minnesota, a bishop-elect had to resign following sexual abuse allegations. In France, a priest was convicted for abusing dozens of scouts. In Argentina, 2 priests were convicted for sexually abusing young children. These were just a few cases. Thousands of more such crimes are getting shrouded in the church's culture of secrecy. Thousands of young lives are being destroyed by predatory priests. The Vatican urgently needs to reform its internal policies. It needs to open itself to human rights scrutiny and allow victims to access justice. It must do so for the sake of its followers and its own diminishing credibility. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Peace talks in Doha and a war at home. That's Afghanistan in a nutshell for you. Over the weekend, the Taliban attacked a strategic city in the country's south. Thousands of people have been forced out of their homes. It's been called a mass exodus. But this is not an isolated incident. Ever since the peace talks were announced, the Taliban has stepped up attacks. Our next report explains why.
What you are seeing on your screens is a mass exodus. Tens of thousands of Afghans on the run, crammed into lorries, belongings in tow. These people are fleeing fresh violence in the southern province of Helmand. Fighting began over the weekend. Taliban fighters mounted a series of attacks. The target was the city of Lashkargah. The government response was swift. Under the cover of US airstrikes, Afghan forces repelled the Taliban fighters. The defense minister was dispatched to Helmand to oversee the operations.
Our visit and the visit by other high-ranking government officials is an assurance that by all means we will defend the Lashkargah city.
30,000 people displaced, dozens of homes destroyed, and hospitals stretched beyond capacity. For those old enough to remember, there are striking similarities with the 1990s. A time when people lived in constant fear of the Taliban. The residents of Lashkargah have seen this before. In 2008, 2014, and 2016 during the Taliban's failed bids to capture the city.
We are exhausted. 3 years ago, same thing happened to us. People were shot in their homes. We are tired. The people are leaving here. If the government can bring security, fine. If not, they should leave.
So what explains this belligerence? Especially at a time when reconciliation talks are underway in Doha. It's a test of resolve. The Taliban wants to see how committed the Afghan government is. How far it can push the government without jeopardizing the talks. There is also the question of America's role. President Donald Trump wants his troops back home by Christmas. The Taliban has endorsed his plan. But with the Americans gone, many in Afghanistan are wary of the Taliban's resurgence.
There was a bit of normal life when the US forces were here. There were no Taliban militants. But months after the US left the area, the Taliban have returned to the district and started their attacks.
The recent surge in violence is not coincidental. It is a part of a larger power struggle in the country. But caught in the crossfire are these innocent citizens? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
There are just 19 days to go for the US presidential election, and guess what's trending in America? It is neither US President Donald Trump nor Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. It's his son, Hunter Biden. There's a lot of commotion, confusion and controversy, and there's also a very important question. Is social media manipulating the US election? Allow me to explain the sequence of events. New York Post published this article on the 14th of October. Smoking gun email reveals how Hunter Biden introduced Ukrainian businessman to VP dad. The headline is Tell All. The article goes on to make a case on an alleged link between Joe Biden and a Ukrainian energy firm. The piece includes email communications with unblurred personal details and some very personal photos. One of them has Hunter Biden smoking. The Post claims that the source of the documents and media files is a computer that Hunter Biden had left at a repair shop in Delaware. This was back in 2019. Now, the article argues, and I'm quoting, Hunter Biden introduced his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, to a top executive at a Ukrainian energy firm less than a year after the elder Biden pressured the government officials in Ukraine into firing a prosecutor who was investigating the company. This is an old case, and there's no evidence of this meeting. And that has not stopped the report from starting a fire, one that social media giants have been trying to put out. Twitter, for example, blocked users from posting the links of this article. Images from it were also blocked. Users who tried to share the article against Joe Biden were shown a notice by Twitter. It read, and I'm quoting, "We cannot complete this request because this link has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially harmful." So the question is, why did Twitter censor the article? It had questions about the origin of the material. What about them? Like I mentioned, the article claims to have material pulled from a computer that Hunter Biden left at a repair shop. Now, Twitter is not alone in censoring the article. Facebook, too, has placed restrictions. Facebook spokesperson Andy Stone tweeted, and I quote, "This is part of our standard process to reduce the spread of misinformation. We temporarily reduce distribution pending fact-checker review." He goes on to say, the story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. Now, just to remind you, this is not the first time that controversies around Hunter Biden are steering the election narrative. Hunter Biden has been the Trump campaign's favorite ammo against Joe Biden. And Donald Trump and his allies have claimed that Joe Biden used the office of the Vice President of America to advance and promote his son's interests. Hunter has also been a favorite among gossip pages. Great lengths have been written about his private life, his struggle with alcohol addiction, drug abuse, divorce, relationships. So the interest around the Post article does not come as a surprise. Also not surprising is the reaction to it pretty much along party lines. What is surprising is the censoring by social media platforms. Democrats have cheered it as censoring of fake news. Republicans have slammed the move. Donald Trump is leading the charge. He spent the first 10 minutes of his Iowa rally reciting the article and slamming Hunter Biden. The president also tweeted and retweeted criticism of Twitter and Facebook. One of the tweets accused Facebook of meddling in the election. Do you think there's some truth in his allegations? As for Twitter, it received a letter from Senator Ted Cruz calling the censorship of the story hypocritical. The senator had 6 questions for Twitter. This is the last one. Let me read it out to you. Have Twitter or any of its employees involved in the decision to censor this reporting been in contact in any capacity with the Biden-Harris campaign or any of its representatives regarding this reporting or the allegations contained therein? He also asked if Twitter has ever censored anti-Trump stories. Twitter has responded to the criticism. Jack Dorsey tweeted that Twitter's communication around this action was quote-unquote not great. He's right, it wasn't. What about the action itself? I will end with a question that I asked yesterday too. Why do social media platforms get to be the arbiter of truth? After taking the stage by storm, South Korean boy band BTS is now rocking the stock market. The band's label has raised $840 million in its blockbuster market debut. It has made BTS members multi-millionaires. The label's founder has become South Korea's latest billionaire. The IPO, South Korea's biggest since 2017. Here's a report.
Recognize them? That's South Korean boy band BTS. It is a big deal. And all about catchy beats, mixing sound with social issues, and being omnipresent on social media. BTS has taken the world by storm, and it recently rocked the stock market. The agency that manages BTS went public yesterday. Here's what happened. Miracle. This is Bang Si-hyuk. He is the founder of Big Hit Entertainment, the agency behind BTS. Bang is now a billionaire. His company's shares opened at 270,000 won on October 14. By the end of the day, Big Hit Entertainment raised 963 billion won, or $840 million from 7.13 million newly issued shares. Big Hit Entertainment has become South Korea's biggest IPO since 2017. And Bang Si-hyuk, the country's newest billionaire. His estimated value is $3.2 billion. These numbers will be symphony to the ears of a BTS fan. But here's one that may ring in horror. 22. That's the number of months every South Korean man is expected to spend in the military. South Korea has compulsory military service, and that applies to BTS too, which means the band may be staring at an end. Or is it? Exceptions to conscription are rare, but they have been made. Footballer Son Heung-min and his South Korean teammates were exempted from the military after they won gold at 2018 Asian Games. Award-winning pianist Seong Jin-cho was exempted too. BTS has brought a lot of pride and money to South Korea, almost $4 billion annually. They are the reason. 1 in 13 foreign tourists visited South Korea in 2017. Seoul is already making exceptions for the boy band. South Korean men are expected to complete their military term by the time they are 28. Jin, the oldest member of the band, turns 28 in 2 months. He has not enrolled himself in the military yet. Jin's conscriptions have been postponed until 2021. We will wrap with a question. Will it be fair on other South Koreans if BTS is exempted from military service? In an opinion poll, 52.4% South Koreans said they wanted exemptions reduced or terminated entirely. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Genghis Khan, a ruthless conqueror who killed millions of innocent people. He's a dreaded figure in history, but for the Chinese leadership, he evokes a very different emotion: fear. China has asked a French museum to not mention him in its exhibition on the Mongol emperor. Our next report explains why.
He would raise an army, and he will take it all back.
Countries often take years to confront their difficult history. But not China. It simply rewrites it, with the help of a vast censorship regime. A museum in France recently got a taste of this. The Nantes History Museum was slated to stage a Genghis Khan exhibit next year. The Inner Mongolia Museum was roped in to help. It was smooth sailing for a while before the Chinese government got directly involved. Beijing sent a list of demands, some of them outrightly bizarre. China asked the museum to not use the words Genghis Khan in the exhibit. Yes, you heard that right. A Genghis Khan exhibit that does not mention the words Genghis Khan. China also wanted the words Empire and Mongols to be dropped. The idea was to strip the exhibition of its identity, but the organizers were having none of it. They cancelled the event and made sure everyone knew who was to blame. China was trying to rewrite Mongol history and culture, not just by interfering in exhibitions, but through a campaign of forced assimilation in the province of Inner Mongolia. The Nantes Museum took note of this campaign. The museum's director made it clear that they would always protect human, scientific, and ethical values. But why does China feel threatened by Genghis Khan? To answer this, we must once again address China's approach to its uncomfortable past. In the 13th century, the Mongols invaded China. Millions of Han Chinese were killed in the conquest. An offshoot of the Mongol Empire ruled over China for almost a century. It was this Mongol offshoot that gave China its current borders. In the 1980s, China tried to appropriate Genghis Khan, to portray the conqueror as one of their own. In 1987, Beijing erected a mausoleum in his honor. All that's changed under Xi Jinping. Minorities, including ethnic Mongolians, are under threat. They are being forced to learn Mandarin in schools, a move that is expected to endanger the mother tongue. The regime is urging Han Chinese to relocate to Inner Mongolia. It is all part of China's grand plan to achieve homogeneity. But ethnic Mongolians have pushed back. Last month, thousands of students flooded the streets in protest, some with their parents in tow. Schools also started reporting a drop in attendance, as parents refused to send their children to classes. The Nantes Museum episode has taught the world community a crucial lesson. Chinese censorship is not all-encompassing. If a museum can stand up to Chinese interference, why can't world powers? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.